Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel Mio Chrome. I am back with another doll and today we are finally continuing with the Bug Girl series. I did announce starting 2 of them and after squeezing in some other projects I finally managed to finish one of them, and the bug I chose this time is a bee. I'm using only creator monster parts for her, and the yellow ones I think are actually supposed to be a bee, so I make sure I use as much of them as I can find. Of course she needs 4 arms, so I'm picking out an extra pair. I want the top hands to be the little grabbing molds and the bottom ones to be normal, so I have to mix and match quite a bit to find the perfect pieces. As you can see, those pieces have been played with quite intensely, so let's clean them. To attach the extra arms, I have to cut off the joints so that the little bars inside the arms are still intact. I also have to drill a hole below her arms and through the body that is just large enough to fit the round part of the arms without completely swallowing them. Next, I remove the face paint of the head with pure acetone. I want to keep the gradient of the bee parts of the Creator Monster doll and even add it to the other parts, so one thing I can already do is paint all the 4 hands black. The body I chose has a gap for a tail, which I don't need, so I just fill in the hole. And to make the color matching of all these different colored pieces easier for me, I prime all of them white. The next thing I prepare is the attachment of the wings. I'm still in the process trying to find the perfect technique for this, and this time I decided to try out basically making ball joints for them. In my head this should work, so let's try it out. I try to drill the most perfect 2 half spheres into the back as I can manage, and I keep testing if these little beads that I think have a good size to be the base of the wings fit in there. To be able to move it around later, I have to drill in this X shape into each of the beads. Now this plastic was rock solid beyond my imagination and I could not get this to work with them, but I found a similar sized wood bead. I only had one, so the other bead you can see is one I made with epoxy sculpt. I quickly test if I will be able to string them properly and then I move on to painting the body. I do the color change with pastels since that is the smoothest way to do it, and the white primer gives it extra grip, so it works super well. I want the yellow to be softer and warmer than the yellow of the Monster High Bee, so I chose this more orange leaning one and also go over the yellow parts. Once all the parts are roughly the right color, I put the body together, and at this point I also string the second pair of arms. And once that's all assembled, I even the color out with more layers of pastel. As I said, I wanted to give her a warm yellow look, so I do the shading with this very warm brown. I think since bees are a bit fuzzy and cute, this fits the concept a lot better than the harsher yellow. However, I do have a concept in mind for a wasp doll with this bolder yellow and harsher lines instead of gradients that has sort of a mean vibe to her. I don't know if it would be a bit boring for you to see a doll that is so similar to this one, or if it would even be more interesting to see a little twist on a similar concept, so tell me if you would be interested. As you can see, I pre-drilled the holes for the antennae and also roughly sketched in her face a bit before doing the color change to prevent having to wipe it all off if I don't like my sketch. I knew I wanted her face to be sweet and friendly, and I also planned to give her a smiling mouth. I draw in her lower eyelid with a bit of a squint so that her eyes look smiley too. I want to match the vibe of the bugs to the personalities of the girls, so Stag Beetle had an edgy look to her and her personality is supposed to be unhinged. And my lore for her is that she kind of has anger issues. I don't know if you've ever seen Stag Beetles wrestle with random objects that are given to them, but basically that's the vibe. Bees, on the other hand, are known as hard workers, important for the environment and generally pleasant and a symbol for a nice summer day, and they produce sweet and delicious honey, of course. So for our bee girl, I decided that she's just that perfect, unproblematic, down-to-earth kind of girly who's just effortlessly pretty and at the same time super nice to everybody. That's also why I decided not to give her the same kind of dangerous looking fangs that Stag Beetle has. I wonder if I should give the girls names at some point. I felt like freckles match her super well because of the summer vibe that bees generally have. I also wanted to give her a good amount of blush. Once I'm happy with her expression, I continue with the irises. I thought I wanted to give her hexagon pupils at first, but then I decided that it would match her soft vibe more if the irises resembled honey. So I tried my best to make them resemble 2 little drops of shiny honey. As highlights, I add glittery paint and little sparkles. Then I matched the darkness of the brows to the eyelashes. I gave her a warm brown lip color and I definitely want her to have an open mouth smile with the teeth showing, so I paint them in with a bit of white paint. And then I glossed the lips. Looking at her, I decided that she needs a bit of a warmer touch in her eyes, so I add a bit of orange. And I also add white freckles. I think that suits her super well. Now I don't know if you noticed, but the glossing of the lips didn't go super smoothly because I did a stupid thing and I didn't close my gloss varnish properly last time I used it. It left this very uneven texture and a weird border that just bothered me so much I couldn't ignore it anymore, so as carefully as I could possibly manage, I removed the lips. Luckily at some point I was able to pull large pieces of the lips off because of the texture of the varnish. Carefully using an X-Acto knife can actually really help with removing paint too. It doesn't have to be super clean since I have to repaint it anyway. The main concern is for the surface to be even, so I started with a repaint once that was accomplished. I also don't 100% like the new shape of the lips, so I'm doing a tiny touch up with some paint and then blend that using pastels. It was a bit scary, but you truly cannot see it in the end and I'm so much happier with the shape now. This time I don't want to take any risks, so I'm glossing with UV resin. This is just one of many things that went wrong with this project. I add the black gradient to the recolored arms with pastels to match the rest. It is time to choose the hair. I was actually so sure to use this orange, yellow and black, but now that I see them next to the doll, those colors are just too overwhelming and don't harmonize with her face. You know, the idea to make a bee actually came from a comment I got ages ago. They suggested these 2 species to me, which are both so orange and fuzzy and warm, so that is where the idea for a warm toned bee actually manifested in my mind, and also the specific orange hair. However, now that I compare all the colors that could match, I think the blonde shade suit her extremely well and settled for this honey blonde. Instead of black, I'm combining it with this dark brown to keep the softer, warmer look. Since the Creator Monster heads are made for wigs and don't have any holes, I am gluing the hair this time. To do that, I have to make wefts first by just cutting a portion of the hair off and gluing it flat on a plastic sheet with PVA glue. Once the glue is dry, I can just remove the whole thing from the plastic. I used the same PVA glue to attach the wefts to the head, starting from the bottom. Most of the hair will be blonde, so for now I'm just working my way up layer by layer. I wanted to take care of the part line at this point already and test how well I can bend the strands over, but even with my curling iron and hair straightener, the thick nylon hair is just so hard to bend properly. I'm really not satisfied with the result, so I remove the top hair and continue normally. I recommend laying the hair flat with the heating tool layer by layer while you're gluing them. This way it's easiest to make them fall nicely and natural looking. This is my second attempt at the part line and it looked alright, but it was so hard to do and I felt like it might not look super neat in the end, so I decided to root only the part line as I actually did before in other dolls, and I don't know why I didn't do this right away. I have to create the holes for the rooting myself of course, but since it's only the part line it's okay. But before I do that, I glue the last layer of wefts, and this is where the dark brown strands come into play. I glue them so that they create some bold but even stripes. Those stripes also serve as my guide, and I root the colors so that they match exactly the ones underneath them. I also had a quick idea that I could still add the orange hair, but only one plug that will serve as a transition color between the yellow and the brown. I think this ended up giving the hair color so much more dimension, and I'm so happy that I had this idea. Once I'm done with the part line, I can fixate it with my usual fabric glue, and once that's dry, I can lay everything flat with my curling iron. We can put the head aside now and work on the wings. I used the body as a guide for the size I want and sketched them onto a piece of paper. I'm warning you now, this was truly a project of redoing things and I guess testing stuff out, and I wanted to find a better method for the wings since my stag's wings got pretty loose because I guess I made them too thin, and my ice fairy's wings are nice and sturdy, but I don't love the thick border the clear warbler creates, at least not for the bugs. My first thought was to go for the in-between and just use a thin plastic sheet instead of the thick warbler. I paint on the skeleton with acrylic paint, just as I also did with the stag's wings. I saw this method in a video by Faerie Cottage, and I really wanted to try it. I also recently got the super viscous gel UV resin, which is perfect. Basically, you create separate shapes of UV resin for all the little segments, and then you put an iridescent shimmer on them, and then you layer on more UV resin. So the first thing that went wrong was that I only have this liquid shimmer and it kind of robbed off the paint of the skeleton. This wasn't so bad since it probably looks better painted on top of the glitter, so that's what I did. But in the end, the shimmery paint turned the whole thing much too milky and I hated it, so I tried again with a super thin layer of the paint. This worked much better, but still made them look kind of milky and somehow a bit dirty, so I just couldn't really accept this one either. I still don't think the painting method is perfect, so I tried small wires, but I scrapped that one pretty quickly. Fourth attempt, I realized the UV resin blob trick has a pretty cool effect on its own without a layer of resin on top, so I built up the thickness first and then add them on top. At this point I was onto something, but I could not remove it from the plastic this time. It was cemented on there and I had no chance. So another one. This time on the thick plastic I also used for the wefts, and I finally like the wing and the effect is pretty cool. Now I copy the skeleton to the other side since there are gradients in there that don't show from this side. I lay some UV resin just regularly on that side and the wing is done. I still have to do the other one, of course. I did it the same way but drew over my blueprint until I could see it on the other side so that I could use it mirrored. But I would recommend just investing in tracing paper. And finally here they are. Make sure to watch Faerie Cottage's video, I'll link it in the description. There are some other cool methods as well in that video. Let's start with the clothes now. For her effortless girl next door look, I chose a white t-shirt that I will combine with a jean overall dress and some Converse chucks. For the shirt, I used Requiem Art Design's pattern from the Petite Slimline Basics. With the bug girls, it's always tricky to make clothes since I have the 4 arms and the wings to work around, so I will have to modify this shirt. However, overalls are naturally super bug girl friendly. I'm adding the trim on the neck by sewing on an extra piece of fabric that I can then turn around and sew again. This makes it a bit easier for me than just trying to pin it down. Sewing the sleeves always makes me so nervous, but I think they turned out pretty alright. The fabric is a bit too thick, but I like the texture. It's from an old shirt of mine. For the second arm pair, I decided to just make holes and to not give them their own sleeves. I basically just cut out the holes for the lower arms and adjust their exact placement as I go. I make sure to just cut in little strips that I can glue back to create a seam allowance. This was so fiddly, I really did think I would ruin it all, but somehow in the end I got it to look somewhat neat. Before adjusting everything to fit, I wanted to have the overall dress finished first. I'm using this super stretchy and old jeans of mine. The fabric is just thin enough to work on doll scale. The dress pattern is from Kosucas or something, I don't really know how to pronounce it, but I will link all the patterns in the description as always, of course. Here's one of the sewn straps, but I think with this fabric they turned out extremely thick, so I decided to make thinner ones and just glue the seams. Then I glue the seams of the pockets with only the top seam sewn to look nice. And then I have to sew the pockets onto the front of the dress. Then I sew on the side pieces and the darts. And here it is with the other seams finished as well. I almost wanted to sew on the straps at this point, but then I remembered I got these tiny overall buckles from AliExpress a while ago because I knew I'd make overalls at some point, and now the time has finally come. It was pretty hard getting the studs in there after sewing the seams, and I would really recommend remembering them earlier. The little front piece is basically just the counterpart of the stud, and I just have to push it in. After managing to wedge them both in, I cleaned the mess I made up with just PVA glue. Coming back to the shirt, I marked where I'd have to put the Velcro so that it fits snug and still leaves space for the wings. And then I sewed the Velcro on. As you can see, there is tons of extra fabric around the upper back where I left the space for the wings. To solve the problem, I just clip it until I like how it sits and then use that as a marker for the darts. I can then just cut off the extra fabric. I actually can't believe how much time I spent sewing and readjusting this tiny piece of fabric, but as I said, this really is the project of trying and failing and trying again. We're close to finally attaching the straps. I just have to sew the counterpart of the buckle on them first. And then I measure how long I need them to be and then sew them onto the back of the dress. And as a last step, the dress also needs Velcro. We can finally move on to the shoes. As I mentioned, I want to replicate some Converse chucks. Since they're flat, I first have to even out the extreme high heel pose of the Monster High foot molds. To do this, I use silk clay. It is super useful for stuff like this since it is easy to use and doesn't get super hard. That way it is really easy to do adjustments to the base shape later. Also bonus points if you know where these legs come from. The piece of foam is just to give me more even and completely flat surface for the sole part. I don't really have a system that I can show you for the shoe pattern. I really just roughly use a piece of paper and sketch in how large I need the piece to be with a pencil. I do one piece that goes around the shoe and one piece for the tongue, and I just look at pictures of the shoes to estimate the shape. I then clean the drawing up a bit and fold it in half to make a symmetrical pattern that I can then transfer to a piece of fabric. This is the same fabric I used for Stag's pants, and I chose to make the shoes black so that the color wouldn't disrupt the gradient effect of the legs. I glued all the seams but still wanted to add a decorative white seam line. I did leave the tip out first when I did the tongue pieces, but then decided that it just leaves more room for unwanted gaps, so I did another one with a front piece that can cover the tip of my shoe base. Attaching the fabric is super easy since I can just use PVA glue. Now I make the soles, and with this I wanted to try using polymer clay this time. I really don't like how hard the shoes become using epoxy or milliput, and I also had difficulties working with green stuff. And these pieces will be so small that I can bake them with my heat gun, so I won't have to wait for hours every time I want a part cured. I use a brown clay first to make the base of the sole, and I push in my shoes so that when I glue them on later, they will sit snug and as seamlessly as possible. I wanted to give the soles some texture as well, so I first baked a base and then added another thin layer of clay to add the texture too, so that I wouldn't mess up the overall shape. But I didn't like how uneven it looked with the tool I used. I then thought it might work better using a utility knife, but apparently I can touch one of these even a second without mutilating myself. What I settled for is to use this screw and just roll it on to create a much more even pattern than I would have been able to do if I carved the individual lines. After gluing the soles to the shoes, I create a long and flat strip of white polymer clay to go around it. I can never manage to keep the little dust pieces of my clay no matter how much I try, but I was able to scratch and sand most of them off. Next I can model the little tips. and an extra strip for the front that I also add some texture to. And we also need the little back piece. And then I can also clean up the gaps a little bit. To clean up between the sole and the shoe, I like to glue on a little piece of string. I did it with an elastic first, decided it was too thick for my liking and ripped it off again. This also ripped off a little piece of the sole that I had to then fix, but it wasn't too hard to do luckily. I then redid it with this thinner one. It is finally time to do the laces that will tie this whole look together. I mark the holes and punch them in. I then string the shoes with the help of a sewing needle. We are not done with the trying and failing yet. I wanted to paint on that classic circle for the logo with just a thick layer of acrylic paint, but I hated how I couldn't fix that painted on look. I quickly gave up trying to sculpt perfect circles, but then I found these little rubber stickers that had the perfect size. They're not super flat, but I think it actually looks cute to have a little extra texture. I paint them white, but I didn't really want to replicate the logo or anything, so I just painted a little yellow heart. So I wanted to be done with this that night, but I suddenly had a really great idea, just a really great idea that totally didn't make my life a whole lot harder at this point. So I saw those little cuffs and how their rings had just the right size to work as eyelets for my little shoes. So of course I had to cut them all out, 20 in total because of the shoe on the inner sides of the shoes. And then I had to unstring everything and glue them on. What I didn't realize is that it was nearly impossible to restring the shoe like this, and it took me literal hours, so time skip. The shoes are restrung without any trace of my struggles, and I just need to add the logos and the inner eyelets. I then realized that I still needed a little black string between the tip and the front of the sole, so I added that. I then really didn't like how it changed from black to white, so I ripped the white string off once again and replaced it with a black one. I paint on the little stripes on the sides of the soles, and for the back logo I also painted a little yellow heart. And the outfit is finally done, and I'm going back to the body since I wanted to add a bit of a brown transition color to the gradients. I also felt that for a bee character she is lacking stripes a bit. They are basically only in her hair, so I wanted to add some only to her legs since bees basically only have stripes on the back part of their body. I wanted to have a sharp border with a gradient only on one side of the stripe, so I masked off where I want the sharp borders to be. In my mind this would match the segmented look of the stripe part of a bee. Of course I ended up hating this and I had to add a gradient to all the sharp edges, but on a good note I think the slight visibility that remains of the edge actually gives it the segmented look in the end. I want to take care of the hair now real quick. The good thing about the Create a Monster dolls is that I can work on the head and body separately and then very easily attach them in the end. I don't want to change the overall length, just cut the longer strands and then give her some nice wavy hair. I use my curling iron for this and I make sure to put some water on the strands first to prevent them from getting frizzy from the heat. I was so close to finishing that doll at this point. I attached the wings to their beads with UV resin and painted over them, and with a little bar I'll add later to hold the elastic, they would be ready for stringing. I then just want to model the antennae by just adding some polymer clay onto some wires, but in the middle of that I somehow managed to get my finger crushed by my tripod and it basically took away the whole rest of the night for me. I mean, it was a total nothing burger, but my finger started bleeding without leaving an open wound, so it basically just collected in my finger, and this feeling just grossed me out so much. I was literally spiraling and I got dizzy and nauseous and I had to lie down. and I wasn't even able to stand up for like an hour, cold sweats and all, which is incredibly dramatic for something so minor, but I don't know, something about being so grossed out about something happening with your own body part just really messed with me. It was so absurd. Anyway, after my little crash out, I was super happy to find that the ball jointed wings for once worked pretty well, and my last addition to the girl is a little honey dipper that belongs to this lip mask my friend gave me, and the second I got this, I knew that this would be going to a doll someday. Just kidding, I spontaneously decided I wanted to embroider a little yellow heart onto her dress, so that was actually the last addition. And now we finally have her, our second girl in the Bug Girl series. I hope you enjoyed watching me suffer through this. Despite all the struggles, I actually really like how she came out, and I feel like I learned a lot about how I want to approach my next doll. Thawing mechanism might actually be something to keep working on. I think with a few tweaks it is very promising. My favorite part might be the hair though, I think it looks so cute. Please tell me your favorite part and just overall thoughts in the comments. I really love reading them, and I'm super happy for everyone who subscribes. If you want to have some more updates on what I'm up to every now and then, you can follow me on my Instagram, which is also just miochrome, and I hope I see you in the next video. Bye!